or we might work on goals around improving the skill of visualization and being able to use that in a more deliberate way as they get back.
That Triathlon Show 180. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode you'll hear yet another repeat guest. We've had quite a few of them recently. This time it is sports psychologist and mental skills coach Carrie Cheadle, who was on in episode 97 to discuss mental skills in triathlon. But as we touched upon briefly then, one of her specialties is helping athletes that are struggling with injury on the mental and emotional side of things. So as promised, she's back to talk about this specific topic. To hear more about Carrie, her bio, her rapid fire questions, and all of that you usually hear on the first episode that a guest is on, go back and listen to episode 97, scientifictriathlon.com/TTS97. But for now, let's go straight into the interview after thanking our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that make electrolyte products for optimal performance and no more cramps. In their recently published annual cramping survey results, which they published under the name Are Athletes Winning the War on Cramp?, they have some great, interesting stats that I mentioned once before, but I'm going to mention them again for new listeners. And that is that 27% of athletes suffer from cramp often, as opposed to just sometimes or rarely. And that's 1 in every 4 athletes suffer from cramps often. That's insane, really. Men suffer more than women, and athletes that are 35 years or older suffer more often than those that are younger. And they split those age groups up into smaller groups. It's not just 2 groups with one that is 35 up and one that's 35 down, but basically after 35 there are pretty small differences between the groups, and the same for under 35, or small enough that 35 seem to be where you could make the biggest distinction. So check out all of those results in detail. There are a ton more things that are very interesting to learn and can help you if you are one of those that, even if it's just sometimes, suffer from cramps. I'm sure you'll find something useful that might help you. And another thing that might, of course, help you is to use their electrolyte products. And you can get your first box or tube of electrolyte product for free when you use the promo code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps, on precisionhydration.com. This episode is also sponsored by Stack. They create the world's most quiet indoor bike trainer, and it has tons of other great features. Since your wheel is not touching any sort of flywheel of the trainer, there's no friction, no real wear and tear of the wheel or tire. All those sorts of things are things that make the Stack Zero great. You can fold it and keep it under your bed. For me, living in one small room in a flat share, that's great. I don't have a ton of space, so being able to store the trainer under the bed is a godsend. And as I mentioned before, within April, you can pre-order their new variable resistance trainer with a discount of 150 euros on stackzero.com/pre-order. And try that discount code TTS20. That will give you 20% off any of their normal trainers. And as I mentioned in the previous episodes as well, you can see that I'm batching my episode recording here. But no, I still don't know if you can combine that code with the pre-order discount. But it doesn't hurt trying, right? So do try it. And if it doesn't work, then 150 euros is still a pretty darn good discount anyway. And remember that you can buy their current versions of the trainer when you pre-order, so that you get a trainer right away if you need one and start riding now. And you'll still get all the same discount, of course, but then you'll get a small upgrade kit when they release the smart trainer, variable resistance trainer later, so that your current trainer can be upgraded to that variable resistance version easily in September when these new versions ship. Again, that's stackzero.com and stackzero.com/pre-order. So there we go. Let's hear the interview with Carrie Cheadle. So today's guest on That Triathlon Show is a repeat guest, Carrie Cheadle, who was on in episode 97 to talk about mental skills and the psychology of triathlon. And she's back now. Welcome, Carrie. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back again. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm really good. And as we talked about already in that interview, we knew that you kind of have an area of expertise of recovering from injuries in terms of the mental side of that recovery process and how to deal with injuries. So that's something that we said that we might bring you back on to discuss, and that's why we're here now. So tell us, what's the latest news on that from your side?
Well, from my side, I think what's interesting, it's funny because I'm seeing more and more articles like in popular media about this topic, which is, it's always fascinating to me to kind of see like when I get really excited about something, if it starts to happen in the greater universe. So I think that this is people are starting to recognize a little bit more that when you're physically injured, it's your sort of first experience of what's happening is very much in your body, right? Like you're physically injured. So you're very consumed with, healing the body and doing your rehabilitation for the body. And people don't often or always recognize that there's a mental healing process that has to happen as well. And there's sort of a mental rehabilitation that has to happen in conjunction with that for some athletes in order to come back into their sport feeling like, come back with confidence and feeling like they're the same athlete, if not better, than they were before their injury. So it's really interesting kind of to see, I'm hearing a little bit more about people recognizing, man, there's this whole mental recovery aspect to coming back from injury that we haven't really been paying as much attention to as maybe we need to.
And I'm hearing that there's a book coming out on that topic as well.
Yes, there is. There is a book coming out on that topic, which I happen to be a co-author of. So myself and my co-author, Cindy Kuzma, we're both just incredibly passionate about this topic. And I sort of recognized, as I did with my first book, that, man, there just isn't really a good resource out there for athletes on this, of like, athletes, every injured athlete I talk to recognizes that, coming back from injury is a pretty big emotional roller coaster, and for some more than others. And I can talk a little bit about that later, but, so I just, her and I are passionate about this topic, and we thought, what, this resource isn't out there and it needs to be. And so we've got a book coming out, on this topic from Bloomsbury, which is a publisher based out of the UK. And it's going to be, it's projected to come out in 2019.
Brilliant. And I guess we'll hear more about the exact dates a bit later, but people can obviously follow you, and we'll have all those links in the show notes so that people can stay up to date with what's going on as more news about that book are released. But let's talk about the actual topic. And you mentioned a little bit like how people react mentally as well as physically to an injury, and what is kind of the typical way that people react or respond to having an injury. But now that if we talk about, stick to the mental side of things.
Sure. So what we usually see is a lot of there's a big emotional reaction at the onset of injury, so right when it happens, and then again a big sort of emotional reaction as you get close to being cleared to come back into competition or get back into your sport. So it sort of has a couple peaks. Although I will say there's, there's there's definitely different emotional reactions that are happening throughout the entire process. So whenever I'm working with an athlete on it, or like presenting on this topic, I talk about it like, the language I use is that you're kind of on an emotional roller coaster. So sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're upside down. Like it really is. And sometimes that's happening all in one day. Like you could have a day where you experience a multitude of emotions, from like feeling sad to angry to hopeful and excited to guilty. And, those emotions are happening throughout the process, but they can also all happen in one day. So it really is, a real emotional and psychological experience, as well as a physiological experience. This idea of recovering from your injury. So it, a typical, the emotions that are the most identified for injured athletes is depression and sadness, and just at that loss of your athletic identity is a really big, a really significant factor. And then also the loss, the loss of just not being able to use your body the way that you want to and the way that you're used to. And also the loss for a lot of people of their social outlet and some of the relationships that you have through your sport. So there's some grief that's happening through the process of not being able to participate in your sport and having to be on the sidelines. And then, so those are some of the main kind of the depression, and sadness is one of the main emotions that people will report. And then the other one is anxiety. And that is with, another very common, for some athletes, not for everybody and not for every injury, but a very common reaction, emotional reaction is fear of re-injury. And just like, can I trust that body part? And especially as you get into different aspects of training again and using that body part in different ways, both trusting the body part, sort of anxiety around like, is my shoulder going to be able to handle this? Is my knee going to be able to handle this? And then also fears around pain and trying to figure out what pain is normal and is like okay to push through, and what pain is a signal that you need to back off. And then also just fear of re-injury, of what if I get injured again and have to start this whole process over again? So those are some of the most common reactions that we see to injury.
And if should we try to control these reactions or emotions somehow? Is there a good way and a bad way to respond?
That's a really great question. And I would say no, there isn't necessarily a good way or a bad way to respond. There are ways that might be more facilitative to the healing process. So we know that, your level of stress, your level of stress can have an effect on your whole experience, your entire rehabilitation experience of, whether or not you're doing your rehabilitation the way that's been prescribed. And also just, it can affect the healing process as well. So, anything that you can do to empower yourself to manage the amount of stress you're under, which is hard, I always feel bad saying that to my injured athletes, because it's like, one of the most stressful things you might face as an athlete is being injured. But, it's so key and so important to, think about ways to help manage that. And so a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the tools that I suggest are around, stress management and kind of, accepting the place that you're in and moving forward from that place. Because it's really...
What would some examples of that be, of how to manage stress, the tool?
Yeah, one is, different breathing exercises and meditation. So sometimes I'll often suggest like checking out the Headspace app, or there's all kinds of different great meditation apps now, like guided meditation apps. I think Calm and Buddhify and Headspace, just to proactively work on your relaxation response, so to speak. And it gives you something that's in your control, because it's really easy to focus on all the things that are out of your control and all the things you can't do when you're injured. So really thinking about the things that you still can do and the things that will help you with your recovery. You know, my philosophy on this idea is you're still an athlete, but now your sport is your recovery, and all of the energy you were putting into competition and being ready to compete and your sport and enjoying your sport, that energy now needs to go into your recovery. This is just a part of your athletic journey. It's a part of being an athlete. So you're still an athlete. Your playing field is a little bit different. So relaxation is one. Another one that I'll often have people do is think about things that bring them joy or make them laugh to balance out some of the stress that they're experiencing. So I'll have them think about their favorite funny movies that they love, or people in their life that, when they're with those people, they can't help but smile and laugh, and set goals, like be very proactive with setting goals for having experiences that bring that type of joy in every week. So those are just a couple examples. There's all kinds of different things, depending on where people are at in their injury recovery process that we might be working on to help them navigate that.
So regarding goals, by the way, is that something that you also work with your athletes about, like when to adjust your goals if you have a race coming up and you get injured and you had some big or small goal for it? Is that something that you have any advice about?
Absolutely. That's a significant part of the process, is making sure that you're adjusting your goals. And the reason for that is especially as athletes, you gauge your feelings of success based on the goals that you've set for yourself. And if you don't consciously adjust those goals, you might be psychologically still gauging your feelings of success based on the original goal that you set, which is no longer realistic, which is no longer something maybe that you're going to be able to do because of coming back from injury. So it's really important to adjust your goals, and have specific injury recovery and rehabilitation goals, and gauge your feelings of success based on those goals, because that's going to feed your feelings of motivation and confidence. But if you're in the middle of your rehabilitation and you're still, all you can think about is how you're not going to be able to accomplish your goal, which is the original goal, that can have a detrimental effect on your feelings of confidence and motivation moving forward. And we know that in terms of success rates and coming back successfully from injury, one of the biggest factors is whether or not the athlete has, committed and to the rehabilitation program that's been laid out for them as it's been written. So they're not doing more than that, and they're not doing less than that. And so, anything we can do to help make sure that they're staying motivated and confident through that rehabilitation process becomes really important.
So how could you specifically formulate one of those rehabilitation goals? Can you give a couple of examples, maybe?
Yeah, so it depends on the injury, and you might be doing this with your treatment team, like you might be doing this with your athletic trainer or your, somebody on your medical team, and an example might be they might help you identify targets for, say, if you have some kind of knee injury and you're working on range of motion, and there's like a way that they measure that. They're going to measure like how far your knee's able to bend, basically. So you might set a specific goal for what percentage you want to be able to bend your knee by a certain date. And so then you're gauging your feelings of success based on that specific goal, and also knowing that you might have to adjust those goals along the way as well. Because sometimes we'll identify a goal and not realize, oh, you know what, I put that goal out there, but maybe I wasn't quite realistic with the timeline because I just didn't know what my body was going to be able to do. So that might be an example of one goal. Or you might, sometimes we'll work on setting goals for some of their mental training and, looking at, okay, here are the things you can't do, but what are some of the aspects of your game or your fitness that you would be able to improve on now that might help you once you get back? So, we might set they might set goals around working deliberately on their core and strengthening their core if that's something that they're still able to do with their particular injury. Or we might work on goals around improving the skill of visualization and being able to use that in a more deliberate way as they get back. So sometimes the goals we might be working on are things that are going to serve them really well once they come back into their sport.
And I guess that second part with visualization and other mental skills factors is something that people can go back to our previous episode in 97 and listen to that to find out some of the ways that they can work on that. But I want to dig a little bit deeper still. Like, if I guess many athletes they haven't really done that. So without going into how exactly you do the mental skills training or mental fitness, if an athlete is injured and have the time now to spare to work on that mental fitness instead, what would be your top 1 or 2 recommendations to start working on?
Visualization is definitely one that can be incredibly beneficial, as well as meditation and breathing. So not only are those going to help through the injury, but those are skills that are going to continue to serve you. So deliberately working on improving those skills during this time is a really good use of your time when you're an injured athlete. And actually, the Headspace app, they've added a sports section, and they have some visualizations on there that are specific to injury. So if you're wanting to have a guided imagery, or visualization, that's a nice place to start. Otherwise, like, there's so many different uses of visualization while you're injured. So you can use it. So basically, when you're engaging in that, your brain is using the same preparatory neural pathways as if you're actually doing that skill, but the motor skill part is blocked. The execution of the motor skill is blocked, but all the other neural pathways the preparatory pathways are the same. So you could see yourself, visualize yourself competing and visualize yourself doing certain skills. Sometimes I'll have athletes, if they're working on they're doing maybe a new rehabilitation exercise, and maybe they're feeling a little bit nervous about whether or not their body's ready. We might have them visualize their body, like right there in rehab, visualize themselves doing it, and then actually do it to see how that helps. You can also use a healing visualization. So imagining, depending on what your injury is, imagining your body repairing itself and seeing it healing and coming back strong. People also use it, you can use it for motivation, just to see yourself competing again. So I will say, for some athletes, depending on where you're at with your injury process, even visualizing some of this stuff might produce anxiety. And so maybe you're just not quite ready for that yet, for using that tool. So you might be using other tools. I'll also have people, write injury affirmations. So affirmations are like powerful, positive statements stated as if they're already true. So these are, they're statements that you can kind of pull out on your piece of paper, and write down 6 to 8 different statements, and be able to read those to yourself in moments when you're feeling down or frustrated, or doubting yourself and doubting your ability, that you can read through those and help remind yourself, I'm getting stronger every day. I can handle the challenges of my injury recovery. Just statements that kind of get you through those times that it can be challenging when you're injured.
And earlier, when you talked about fears, I guess one of the most common fears, I think at least, that would be my guess, that athletes have, is that when they get back, that they won't be anywhere near as fit. They will be very unfit, especially if it's a long injury. Yep. And so how do you suggest that athletes tackle that fear and work on that?
That's a great question, because that's definitely another common fear is you're injured, and not only are you worried about, oh my god, I can't participate in my sport, I can't, what if I get re-injured? You're also sometimes preoccupied with, I am losing fitness while everyone else is gaining it. And the fear of like, I'm going to get back into my sport and not be as fit as I was. And part of it is accepting that is true. That is true. You probably won't be as fit as you were before you were injured, if you were training on a consistent basis, because you haven't been able to. And so one thing is to, there's a couple things that become important in this situation. One is I tell athletes, like, your recovery is never going to happen as fast as you want it to, ever. Even if you're only out for a week, you want to not be out at all. So no matter how long it takes, it's never going to happen as fast as you want it to. So to just settle in, and be okay with how long your body needs to heal. And then also letting yourself know your fitness is going to come back. It's not a matter, making the assumption that this is an injury you're going to be able to recover from. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Like, it's going to come back. And that's again where making sure you're adjusting your goals is really key. Because if you're, getting back into your sport and into training, and you're out there and you're still just comparing your ability right now in this moment in your recovery, you're comparing that to what you were doing and your level of fitness before you were injured, it can have that detrimental effect to your feelings of confidence. So you really have to accept, this is where I am right now. Where do I want to be tomorrow? And where do I want to be next week, based on where I am right now, not based on what I was capable of doing before I was injured. You don't worry about that. That's not something that's in your control right now. You'll get there eventually, but right now you need to focus on, where am I right now and where do I want to be tomorrow?
Yeah, I have a personal anecdote. I was at our team's track practice a couple of weeks ago, and just running very easily with my boggy knee, and the rest of the team was doing really hard lung busting intervals. And then when I stopped my short, easy run a few laps around the track, I was standing there with my coach and talking with him, and we were looking at all the other people running really well. And I was saying, man, when I get back, I'm going to be running with the girls. So. But that's, and he said, yeah, and that's probably, that might be true, but it's all about accepting that, I guess, and then taking it from there. So good, very good advice. I think that's most of the things that I have to ask you from you today. Well, one more thing. So let's say that we have injured athletes that are listening now. What are, if we lay it out in like very short, very simple action steps for them, what would be the things that they should start doing today?
Yeah, I actually, excuse me. The first thing I would say is sign up. Come be a part. If you're on Facebook, I have it's called the Injured Athletes Club, and it's a group of just injured athletes that are there to support each other through all of the trials and triumphs of being an injured athlete. So that's one thing is, it can feel really isolating when you're an injured athlete and the people around you don't totally get it. And sometimes inadvertently might say things that feel hurtful or unhelpful. And so, it's really neat to see all of these injured athletes communicating with each other and just supporting each other through the process of being injured. So it's kind of like finding your tribe while you're injured. It is really, really powerful. So, making sure that you're reaching out for support is a pretty important one. So the Injured Athletes Club is a way that you can do that for yourself, proactively seek out support. And you can also seek that out from people in your life as well. Coaches and teammates and friends and parents, and just know that, it's kind of like you're building your own team right now of, maybe if you're participating in a team sport or you're part of a club, that you train with, you miss out on that camaraderie and having all of those like-minded people in that place that kind of feed your energy and excitement for your sport. And when you don't have that, you have to build a different team for yourself, which is your injury recovery team. So, being proactive with doing that for yourself is a kind of a key part of that injury recovery. And also, I have all kinds of different blog posts on my website that are specific for injured athletes and different tips and tools that you can use for yourself to help you navigate this whole injury recovery process. I think the other thing to know that another aspect that I see people struggle with is, for some people, they might have recovered totally fine from, injuries in the past. And all of a sudden, with this particular injury, they find themselves nervous or they find themselves having a hard time coming back. And so to just know that that's normal too, that just because you haven't struggled with that with your other injuries and other recovery, that sometimes this happens. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to psychologically recover from this injury. You just have to have the tools to be able, it's just not something you had to do in the past. You just need the tools to be able to work on that moving forward. I would say the other tip that can be helpful is creating your own sort of hierarchy list, like your, I call it the anxiety pyramid. So you're just brainstorming a list of all the different things that have you feeling a little bit uncomfortable or nervous as you think about them with your recovery, from things that are just like give you a little tiny niggle of anxiety all the way up to the one that's like the big mother, like you don't even want to write it down because it produces so much anxiety. So you kind of have and you build your pyramid, and on the bottom are the ones that maybe produce the least amount of anxiety. And that's where you want to start working on your goals and working on, that's where you want to start building your confidence back up, is just looking at how can I set a goal around that one that just gives me a little bit of anxiety and work on that until I feel solid with that. And then think about going to the next step. So, don't push yourself more than you're mentally ready for. So I'll have that sometimes, often with, sometimes you're physically ready before you're mentally ready to get back into competition. So really making sure that you've done both your physical and your mental rehab.
All right, brilliant. And I guess that that's about it, because we have already completed the rapid fire questions with you on our last interview. So Carrie, thanks a lot for coming on. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this interview, people can, well, first of all, if they go to your Facebook group, which we'll link to in the show notes, then they will probably through there be able to follow the update with your book, I would assume, as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. And all the other things, as usual, will be linked to in the show notes, your website, carriecheadle.com, and everything will be linked up. So Carrie, thanks a lot for coming on. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we close off this interview?
I think that's it. Good luck on your injury recovery. You can do this.
Thanks. Yeah, I will. I have my goals. With my chiropractor, we're actually kind of measuring the autonomic nervous system response, and that's improving a lot. So nice. That's kind of working on the functionality, but now it's just getting the actual pain to go away. So it's more of a tissue healing thing, which takes some time, but I'm very positive about it.
Awesome.
So one more thing that I can mention from a personal experience, by the way, is that one thing that I think is working well is to look at examples of athletes that have come back really well from injury. Like, for example, Alistair Brownlee having a hip surgery this last autumn, and now a month or so ago, or even just a couple of weeks from when we record this interview, he just crushed the half Ironman in Dubai, I think, and did a sub 2 hour bike ride and like just crazy fast times, and won it by a landslide. So that's a good example. It wasn't that long ago that he had that surgery and couldn't train at all, but then he came back and was super fast anyway. So I think those examples can be useful of other athletes that have done it.
Absolutely.
All right, Carrie, it was great talking to you again, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, I really hope that you enjoyed that interview. A few key takeaways is, for me at least, the thing about goal setting and adjusting your existing triathlon goals when needed and making new rehab and recovery goals instead, plus even other complementary goals like working on your visualization that will help you get that better performance when you get back to racing, because you will be stronger or be able to mentally be at the top of your game. So adjust your existing triathlon goals and make new goals that are related to rehab and complementing skills to your normal swim, bike, and run. Second, tuning in on that visualization aspect, work on that, because that can help both with your specific recovery from injury and your rehab, make you get back to health faster, and again later on in your triathlon performance. And work on breathing and meditation to manage that stress, which may impair your recovery process, make it go slower, or even prevent you from recovering altogether if the stress is too big. Finally, accept that your recovery is never going to happen fast enough. That will help you not be as down about it, and that's not being down about it is not going to help anybody. So it's better to just accept that it will happen at the rate that it happens, and of course do your best to make it happen as quickly as possible, but don't have any unrealistic expectations, and know that however fast it happens, you would, of course, in an ideal world, wish it to happen even faster. So, as usual, you can find the show notes for this episode on thattriathlonshow.com. And if you have questions or comments about this episode or any other episode, then leave those comments and questions on the show notes page, and I will get back to you and answer right there. In the next episode, I will talk about tapering for triathlon. It will be a solo episode, and I will dive into the research, but I'll also give you some examples of practical examples, how to design your taper week or weeks, etc. So you will have both sides of the coin, the practical and the scientific. By the way, I'm thinking of actually making a couple more episodes like the one I did with my teammate and coach in episode 106, where I interview age group athletes like yourself about your triathlon story and things that you've learned that may be useful for other listeners to hear. So, if you'd like to be interviewed on That Triathlon Show, send me an email to michael@scientifictriathlon.com, and that's Michael with a K, and tell me a bit more about yourself and what we could talk about during the interview. You do not have to be an age group world champion or anything like that. It's just as fine if you recently completed your first sprint triathlon. That's absolutely just as good, because then we can discuss that journey from a complete newbie to completing your first race, which is equally important to going from very advanced to age group world champion, if we have any age group world champions in the audience. So I really look forward to hearing from you. Send me those emails again to michael@scientifictriathlon.com. Finally, thank you so much to our sponsors. Stack is the go-to company to go to if you're looking for a new bike trainer. Again, I use it myself. I personally recommend it. And go to stackzero.com/pre-order to learn more about that new variable resistance version that is coming out in the fall of 2018. And it has a great discount, but it's only valid in April, so you need to act quickly. But for any other normal trainers, you can also use the discount code TTS20. That will give you 20% off a trainer that is already incredibly affordable compared to other trainers with similar features. And thank you to Precision Hydration for sponsoring this episode. If you want to learn a bit more about hydration, check out their cramping survey and all the other great blog posts that they have under the hydration advice tab on their website. For example, recently there have been great articles on hydration for older athletes. That's just one example, but there are all sorts of specific topics that are covered under the big umbrella of hydration there, so that you can learn more. And it's really in-depth quality content. It's not fluff, so I highly recommend it. Of course, on precisionhydration.com you can buy their electrolyte products, and you can get your first order or box or tube for free when you use the discount code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word and all caps. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.